So, greetings, hello to everybody, hello to all Dharma friends. Mi tsamala, jojo tsamala, tashi dele shukiyo. This is video number 2 in my series about Buddhist practice with ADD. Di donang jempe nepa nyamlin chegengi nyamyong korla. Video nipares. Liu nipa vamna halam tegire. So the topic of this video is experiences of retreat and tips of how to structure retreat for somebody with ADD. And I should begin, of course, by saying that these videos are shared as somebody with the experience of having ADD and trying to do Buddhist practice. They are not shared as a medical or psychological professional. So just, you have to give those caveats in this day and age. So I'm giving that caveat now. Then it video di joja karire slamna nganso di tsam seria di tsam sena nganso inji tsam tsikti le labo chik shigire dwa tsam sena dene so sachetes wempa de pe kaplola nyamlan tes shuk chewa gi tutsu den so kandes lagoreti donang jembe nepa yena kandes nyamlan chogres di dabo redwa. So the word retreat is used kind of very loosely in Western Buddhist context. It can mean like anything from a 2-day teaching intensive to like a drupchen, where there's a constant mantra recitation, all the way up to, the 3-year, 3-month, the very famous Tibetan Buddhist 3-year, 3-month retreat. So I should specify that my experience is not of a 3-year, 3-month retreat, but I have experienced intensive periods of practice in different traditions. So I did spend, for those of you who know me, you'll know that I did spend a fair amount of time in Thailand. So I'm a little bit familiar, definitely not expert, but a little bit familiar with some of the Theravada traditions of shamatha, placement meditation, and vipassana, insight meditation. But, over, I guess I started attending Buddhist events in the mid-90s. So since the mid-90s, most of the experience that I've had of retreat or more intensive practice has been in the Tibetan tradition. So, of course, all these videos are going to be from personal experience. They're not meant to apply, certainly not to everyone, and also not to everyone with ADD because, as I said, I have ADD inattentive. That's different from somebody who has ADHD, and that's different from somebody who has ADHD along with maybe other facets of neurodiversity. So I just share from my own experience, but please listen with a critical mind, listen to yourself and think, is this something that's useful for me or not? I'm not sharing as a teacher. I'm an interpreter and a translator of Buddhist teachings. I don't claim to be an expert teacher. So please just see this discussion as a Dharma friend. Video den so nangla nga gegen yin dokto che taje che yo mare ro. Nanso di chocho keche shia. Di tsorwa des keagi. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to share is that for myself, I've done group retreats and individual retreats. And I found that for myself, as a person with ADD, individual retreats are a lot more suitable and a lot more fruitful for me. So it's been a while since I've been in a group retreat situation. I sort of knew that they weren't my ideal situation, but I would attend, especially if there was a teacher who I had great respect and affinity for, and I really wanted to receive teachings from them. And really the only way to get extensive teachings from them was in a group retreat context. So specifically, I think about the late, great Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Rinpoche gave the most extensive and detailed teachings in a retreat setting. So to be able to receive teachings from Rinpoche, I was very happy to go and, sit for 10 days or 12 days or whatever in a group retreat setting and participate in everything. Because just receiving teachings from such a special teacher was very worthwhile. But in terms of my own cultivation, in terms of my own meditation practice, group retreats were not ideal for me. And so I'm going to explain why. As somebody with ADD, we have kind of a different way of socializing, which I mentioned briefly in the previous video. But I feel like we're also more sensitive to other people's energies. So certainly, um, in Thailand, I did some kind of retreat type things with majority Thai participants, and it was like a little bit more relaxed. Thailand gimi kandislagore tsam degen mi mombo nyamdu tsam dena kozo nyamu nyu tsam dene tsorwa tes lulure dua yine di tsam desa di mongchewa chige yena dene tsam tsagi tsigegi tswa tes yore. But I found that in Western settings, I think part of it is it's so difficult for people to kind of get the time off and maybe get the money together to participate in a retreat that they want the retreat to be really great. And so people go in with a sort of very intense energy. And that very intense energy can lead to a lot of mental tightness. And so, because I have ADD in those retreat situations, I was very careful about how I interacted with people because I knew that if there was a misunderstanding, my mind would replay it again and again when I was supposed to be doing the retreat session. So I, kept some distance, but when there's misunderstandings between different people, like I was sitting in a place one time where on the first day, the two people sitting, I think, directly behind me, they had gotten into some disagreement about the seat. And so that energy that they had, the looks that they gave each other, and the energy between each other, that is something that I could sense in a lot of the sessions. And indeed, at the end of the retreat, one of the people told me I was so upset with her the whole time. So, it wasn't just in my head. So this kind of energy, I found that I was very affected by it. And I know that it's an inappropriate attention, but is still, as someone with ADD, you're very kind of sensitive to those energies. So avoid conflict if you can. There was a layperson who was sitting behind me at first in this retreat. She said, "You're too tall. I can't see Rinpoche when he's teaching." So I said, "No problem," and happily moved back. So if you're somebody with ADD, if you're sensitive to those kind of energies, really just try to minimize any conflict possible because you know that your mind might be replaying it. So that's just a little bit of experiences of group retreats. So individual retreats, as I explained, these worked better for me. So mostly what I'm going to be sharing here is in the context of four lerung. So lerung is a Tibetan word which means like suitability or serviceability. And it's a type of retreat where you're counting mantras to complete a certain amount of mantras and be suitable to do certain actions associated with the deity. So within various deity practices, when you complete the fixed number of mantras, that's a lerung. And then after the jinsek, the homa or the fire puja, you're allowed to do, kind of broader aspects of the practice. So without going too much into that, because it's definitely not appropriate to talk too much about Anuttara Yoga Tantra, but that's just basically how it works. And so out of those four, three of them, I kept kind of more of a strict boundary. And I think for two of them, I had no communication at all. One, I had minimal email communication. And then for the fourth one, I did this at home in this very room, actually. And I had to keep some measure of communication. And that was its own thing, but I'll speak a little bit about that as we go on. So why do I enjoy this particular type of retreat, the lerung, the action permitting, or the nyendrup, the proximity retreat? I enjoy this type of retreat because it lets you use all of your faculties. Whereas, in Thailand, when we were just doing shamatha and you're just focusing the attention on the breath, I found this a real struggle. I learned a lot from it. Don't get me wrong. I think I learned a lot from it. It was definitely beneficial, but it really felt like a struggle. these type of lerung, these deity retreats, I found much more natural. Part of that is because in the context of a lerung, you get to do many different things. So you get to do visualization, you get to do mantra recitation, you get to do contemplation. So this makes it a really ideal situation for somebody with a ADD type neurodiversity. At least I think so, because there's different things that you're doing in a session, not the same thing the whole time. That variety keeps the mind engaged and enlivened. In terms of the structure of the sessions, what I've found, and this is again counterintuitive maybe, is that I found that having, generally in the text it says you're better to start with several shorter sessions at the beginning of the retreat. So it's usually like tunji namginyo, so usually 4 sessions. And they say, in the beginning, start shorter and then you can increase the time. But the problem is, in the context of the lerung, of this particular type of action permitting retreat, if you start with 4 sessions, you have to maintain 4 sessions throughout the whole retreat. Nima tambo ne tunji go tsuna, then nima re tunji so go gire. When a session goes really well, right? And it does. As a person with ADD, you also do have sessions that go really well where you want to stay longer. So if a session goes really well, but you think you have to fit in 4 sessions in that day, this can create like a lot of namtok, a lot of discursive thought, a lot of worry. Oh, this is going really well. Like, as a person with ADD, right, we worry a lot. You think, oh, this is going really well, but I have to fit in 4 sessions, so it's going really well, but maybe I should stop. So I did 3 sessions. And then if I wanted to sit, let's say the standard session is 2 hours, but if I wanted to sit 3.5 hours, I definitely could. And I did actually many, many times. There was one retreat where mostly I did sessions of 3.5 hours and was very happy doing that. So that's the first thing. Give yourself flexibility in terms of the time that you're doing the session, but also the number of sessions. So I would suggest don't necessarily start with 4 sessions. Do the first day with 3. If you want to do 4 sessions later, you can do that, but you have to maintain the minimum number of sessions that you did the first day. So I would suggest starting with 3 or maybe with 2 if you're doing kind of a semi-retreat situation where you still have to have some kind of social interactions. The second thing that I wanted to recommend in the context of a mantra counting retreat is don't go with a mala with tiny beads. As people with ADD, sometimes our mind starts to move very quickly. This can cause the hand to move more quickly than it should. And one of the struggles that I've heard from people with ADD during these kind of mantra counting retreats is that they felt unsure if they really counted the number of mantras that they thought they did. So what I suggest, and people are going to laugh at me, but people do anyway, so that's fine, is to get a really huge mala. So this particular mala is called a tulsi mala. Tulsi is a kind of holy basil tree. And this is used in the Hindu tradition, in the Vaishnava tradition. So the most famous Vaishnava tradition is probably the Hare Krishna tradition in the West. So they have these very large beads. And you can see that between each bead, the string that holds the mala, that holds the rosary together, is tied in a knot. So you're not going to skip over. It's going to stop you from wanting to count faster or mistakenly counting 2, because there's a string in the middle and each bead is larger. So you have a lot more confidence in your count of mantras. As well, the size of the bead is something tangible. And as somebody with ADD, we often find things that are sort of more tangible, very grounding. So I would find that when I was doing the mantra recitation, it could be very helpful to have this bead and to just experience the feeling of what that tulsi wood felt like. And that would ground my mind when my attention was going elsewhere, because of course you want your attention on the mantra. And if you're trying to do some visualization with the mantra recitation, on that visualization. So I found that extremely helpful. I also found it extremely helpful to have the sadhana really kind of clear in my mind as to what I was doing. Because with a discursive type of ADD mind, if we don't know what we're doing, if things don't make sense, that can either cause us A, to get frustrated, or B, to want to try to learn everything. And in retreat, you're not really in a situation where you can learn everything very effectively. So I would say get a proper commentary. I mean, and that can mean reading a book if you have to, but ideally get a commentary from a lama, you know, get a commentary, take some notes, practice a little bit, and then do the retreat so that you have an idea of what you're doing and it's personally meaningful for you. If it's personally meaningful for you, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to maintain good attention during the retreat. And so what I found what was really helpful too is that, of course, in a mantra counting retreat, you want to get a certain number of mantras done in a day. So, that's part of it. But I would also have notes about what I wanted to focus on that day. So some days, for example, I would maybe want to focus on visualization. So in the first session of the day with the prayer to the lineage masters, the Laju Sodeb, I would want to have the visualization very clear. And I would also want to know a little bit about who these various lineage figures were. So I would have notes about that, and I would go through that. And so then, go through that sort of very scrutinizingly, have the rest of the sadhana flow, and then do the mantra counting. Other days, I would want to focus on the three kayas meditation. Geshe-la advised me that, of course, the kusum lam kir tsore duarwa, jenda dinso yenla. He always says, that taking the three bodies into the path, this is the main practice of the generation stage. Everything else is the branches. So I spent quite a lot of time developing the three bodies practice in each of those retreats. A lot of that was kind of deciding to focus on one of them, going through the cycle of all three, but focusing on one of them. And particularly with the last one, taking rebirth into the path of the Nirmanakaya, really learning about the various features and the appearance of the deity. And also trying to hold that meditation a little bit so that when it came time to the mantra recitation, one is thinking about reciting the mantra recitation and oneself as the self-generation with the various features of the deity. The more vivid that appearance is for you, the more lifelike it's going to seem. And the easier it is, it's going to be to feel enlivened during your retreat. So the other thing I wanted to talk about also was structuring other activities. So you have the activities in session and you have the activities off session. And so in terms of the off session activities, I tried to, firstly, I'm not the most fit person, but I did do some exercise every day. I found that doing some exercise and especially getting outside in the fresh air, that was very important for my mind to feel invigorated. Secondly, deciding what I was going to read during those sessions, because between sessions you can read and learn about the practice or read about the Lamrim texts. I knew that my mind would go all over the place because I'd been putting so much attention to the session, and that reading could become a very discursive and unhelpful thing. So I just picked three different books, and those were sort of my companions in the retreat. And I tried to read deeply. And when I couldn't read deeply, I just made a cup of coffee or I made a cup of tea and I sat outside and just enjoyed the expanse. A couple of times, I had a couple of retreats where I just had to stay in the house. One time I was staying in the house and Geshe-la had gone and our Vajra Guru, Khenso Rinpoche, was gone. So I was actually, and Geshe-la's cousin was gone, the other Geshe. And so I was kind of alone in the house, and I ran out of milk. And so, the ADD mind was thinking, what am I going to do without milk? I need it for my coffee and things like that. So I thought, well, this is an emergency. So it's okay for me to go out. So I opened the gate and I went and purchased the milk. And then a few hours later, from the other side of the gate, right? The house is kind of like one of those Haveli type deals that you have like a wall and a gate to keep goats and things like that out. Um, I heard Khedrup, Khedrup, Khedrup. I was like, "What's something you?" I'm doing a retreat. He said, came and do, show. So I opened the gate and this monk passed me a phone. And on the other end was one elder Baksal Lama who helped me in several retreats and with the fire puja, Geshe Tsiringunrup. And he, scolded me. He said, he said, "Buzut sam degerwa, kaza kala drogi mendus." He was like, you're supposed to stay in the boundary during the retreat. So if you finish this retreat, you're like, I didn't get a feeling anything significant happened. That's because you didn't respect the boundary. So anyway, that's just a funny story, but that sort of motivated me to really keep the boundary. So having a person who's advising you in your retreat, this is the point here, having a person who's advising you in your retreat and is going to encourage you in your retreat as a person with ADD, I think that that's like even more important. So even if you're doing your retreat at home, if you have a teacher who you're able to email or a Dharma teacher who you're able to email if you need, or you can have the boundary that like, okay, these 2 or 3 people are allowed to come in and we'll just talk about Dharma or how the retreat is going. That can be a very helpful thing. In terms of managing communications, like I said, for 3 of the 4, I really try to minimize those communications because the mind can grasp on to those things. And, part of ADD is maybe sort of like that obsessive thing. So if someone tells you that something's gone wrong, you're going to grasp at that. So I experienced this when I had text messages in a retreat. There was an issue that somebody was texting me about. That was like very disturbing. So I kind of learned that texting really doesn't work with me for retreats. So in the future, I'll only communicate through emails. And you learn these things. The other thing I wanted to say too is that um, as a person with ADD, when you have a day that's not so great in retreat, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't start building into a failure narrative. Use it as an experience, right? This is, korwe rangjin, the nature of samsara. Not every day is going to go swimmingly. So I found this, right? When I had this issue with the texting, there were a couple of days where the mind was very disturbed. But I really consciously said, I'm not going to let that become the narrative of this retreat. So, okay, I'm here for 16 days. 2 of those days weren't great. So what? That's okay. And so this type of mentality, having kind of like a more expansive mentality and being willing to take the experiences that come with the retreat, not just bliss, 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 or profound, 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 because it will be blissful and profound sometimes, but it might not be blissful and profound all of the time. So just accepting those days that don't go well. And also, as people in the West, we can't always have perfect conditions. Sometimes we have responsibilities and we have to minimize our work commitments or our social commitments, but we can't get rid of communication completely, right? So then if you can't just be completely without any communication for 3 months, you're never going to do a retreat, right? So that's also not realistic. So just do your boundaries the best you can. And also know that when something doesn't go well, when there's a day of your retreat that doesn't go well, that's actually fine. And in fact, those couple of days that didn't go well, they were some of the most instructive days of that retreat for me because they really showed me, in terms of, especially my stages of the path, my Lamrim practice, what are the points that I need to work on? How can I kind of build my mental resilience so that, small things are not so disturbing? So I just, try to take everything that happens as an instruction. And when you're in a strict situation, in a situation of strict retreat, As a person with ADD, I would say build yourself up to that. So I had already spent a lot of time in Thailand in some kind of sort of semi-retreat situations. So I slowly built my mental resilience. And then, although as I said, it wasn't always bliss, 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 profound, 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 I was able to have some very decent experiences in retreat where I was quite cut off without the mind feeling kind of in like a shock, because it's so different than my normal lifestyle. So build yourself up to that slowly, I would advise. And so out of those four, I think, two of those approximation retreats, those mantra accumulation retreats were really helpful for me. One was very difficult because a very close teacher of mine died actually the day before I was to begin the retreat. And one of my teachers asked me, are you sure you still want to do it? And I was just like, yes, I have to do it. This is the best way to honor him. But, my mind was, thinking about this teacher and feeling quite sad about it. So the smart thing to do would have probably been to, wait a month or two and then try to do the retreat. So when you're experiencing something, when you're experiencing like a stress or some sad news, be kind to yourself and don't maybe force yourself into retreat, because you might have a better experience if you just give yourself a little bit of time. So that one was difficult, even though I had quite a strict boundaries. And so the result of that, right, being upset about the teacher passing away, thinking about that, was that it was hard to kind of not be discursive. And I found myself kind of like leaving the retreat room and coming out and, walking around all the time. And there was just that nervous energy that we have when we're stressed. So when that's happening, probably not the ideal time to be doing retreat. And finally, the other thing that I wanted to say is that in terms of building your experience with retreat, it is actually true that each one gets easier. And especially with mantra counting retreats, as your knowledge of self-generation practice grows, it's going to become something that is more meaningful, more vivid each time. So even if you think the first experience wasn't really what you expected it to be, just know that it will get better with time. And this is the other context of, I think, why an individual retreat, especially with mantra counting, can be very helpful, because you're not in a group situation where you have to finish the mantra in a certain amount of time. So either you feel pressure or you finish like way before everybody else, and you feel kind of awkward because like everyone's still counting. You're like, what am I doing here? Of course, ideally you'd do some extra, or you would meditate, but it can be a little bit of an incongruous feeling. So that's why kind of the individual container is something that works very well for me. So I think I'm going to end the video here, because I don't think I've ever made a video that's a whole half hour, but we're at 28 minutes. So I'll leave the video here, but maybe I'll come back to this with more retreat experiences if people are interested. But the next video, Liu Sumpa, Nima Rejegi Kandun, Nima Rejegi Nyamle. So the third video is going to be about maintaining a daily practice, maintaining a daily recitation commitments. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.